Hey everyone, today we're going to look a little bit at playing around with HDRs in Blender with cycles and Eevee. We're going to take a look at using the integrated pre-made ones in Blender, playing around with cycles, and then how to create your own if you need finer control. So first things first, let's look at using the preloaded ones. So in cycles or Eevee, either one, you can go here, and if you turn off Scene World, it'll give you different HDRs you can pull from. And with these HDRs, you can rotate them, uh, pull up and down the strength, choose how much background you want. So this is pretty nice, and it's a good way if you just need to quickly, light your model with some pre-made HDRs. It's great, but when it comes time to render, it's not quite as good if this isn't exactly what you're looking for. So if we're looking for more studio lighting for this, maybe these aren't the best choice. Even with this one, maybe it's not the exact studio lighting we want. So let's take a look now at how we pull our own in. So we do need to turn back on Scene World, and you can see I already have one set up. So I do want to show how I set that up. So if we go to the Shading tab here, and we go back to Rendered, by default, when you change this to World, you'll have these two. And then we have these three that we added on. So this is environment map, mapping, texture coordinate, generated into vector, vector into vector, color to color. This will control the strength. Use this to select different HDRs. So you can just double click and open any of them. And then from here, using the Z, you're able to rotate it around. This is pretty nice. And you can, see dynamically the background update. But let's say you actually want to render this out fully and you don't want this background. Because this background, it's cool to preview and cool to see where the lights are, but it really isn't great to have in all your renders. So one quick fix we can do with that is we go to the scene settings, and we can go to film drop down here, and we can just turn on transparent, and that'll just completely make the background transparent, and now we can focus more on our model. One thing I like to do is actually have like a little, just white kind of sheet for it to sit on to add some shadows and stuff, to give it a little bit more physicality. But when I am editing the HDR, I'll keep that off so I can see the background. So let me turn this on again. And so let's say I'm trying to place the light with this pulled in HDR. I can definitely do it through here, but it does take a minute to update. So the really nice part about Blender is I can go over to Eevee and I can just click and drag, and I'm just kind of watching the light update real time, which again, very, very nice, very quick to update. And then when I'm happy with how the light's placed, I can go back to cycles, it'll update, and I'll have the render done again. And by the way, for this tutorial, this is just it's a very simple material, no edge beveling, no anything. I just want to focus more on the lighting and less on the actual model. So let's take a look now. We've gone over how to use Blender's integrated HDRs, how to set up your own HDR from an image. And so let's take a look at what if you want to make your own HDR. So there's this plugin HDR Pro Studio. It's free to find online. The only, I guess, problem with it was never finished development because of some sort of patent. I'm not 100% sure. So there's a few bugs with it. It doesn't work 100% smoothly, but at the same time, it's free, so can't really complain when most other alternatives you would find cost a lot more. I know you can do it in KeyShot, but that's a couple $100. There's like the HDR Studio app, but again, that's 100 or 300. I forget how much it is. So for the price of free, this is pretty amazing. And it's all integrated in my render workflow now, so it's nice not having to jump between apps. So when you first load this up, you're not going to see this image. You're just going to see a blank checker box. You go here and you open up any HDR you want. What I recommend though is go into Photoshop, make a completely black HDR with the proportions of a typical HDR image, and then just import that in. So this is an HDR image with absolutely no data. When you open this up, you'll have this option to edit this image. And sometimes if you've been working and like editing, it will break. So you have to go back and like reload Blender and go back to edit this image. The other thing this does is it actually changes the stuff on the right here, and it changes your UI setup. Sometimes it actually breaks your undo too, so you need to go to edit preferences, undo, and reset that to like re-enable it. It doesn't wipe it, but it just unchecks it, which kind of frustrating. But once you fix it once, it should be all good. So you go to edit this image, and then once you click edit this image on the right here, you notice it all went black. That's because it's using this HDR now. So we can press plus, and you can see we just added a light. And now we can just, go around and drag these lights. And we can go to the shading here, and we could just reset this to 0. Go back to HDR Pro Studio, so now it's kind of lighting from this side. And so now the really nice part is we can kind of go in here. And for this top one, let's do like a square on top. So I'm going to turn off Is Ellipse. I'll do 4 sides here. And then, let's pull down the height a bit. So it's like this kind of thin highlight. Pull up the width a little bit. So now we have this really, really nice kind of top light on our model. And this looks pretty nice. We could hit plus again. And we can always lock these lights if we're done with them. We could add the kind of, light over here. And the great part about doing this again in cycles, in Eevee, is that most programs, when you edit HDRs like this, you're spending a lot of time waiting for the render to update. I mean, depending on your computer, but for an average computer that's pretty powerful, but not like a supercomputer or, like a crazy workstation computer, you are spending a good amount of time just waiting. So this is a nice option. And the cool part is you can load any HDR you want and add to it. So if you have a favorite HDR, you could use that, and then you could use that HDR and then add lights on top of it. So I'm just going to go around, add a few lights. Not worrying too much about it right now. So let's say we want something like this. When you're done with this, you can go to Image and Save As, or edit externally, but you can save as, and then it'll automatically be in HDR. And now you can open that in Photoshop. You can open that in other programs. Really nice. But so yeah, now we have it all set up. We can see our HDR here. And again, very easy with Eevee to preview where your lights are. So now if we want, we can go into cycles. We'd see, we're getting a really nice render here. Since we don't need to see the background anymore, we can go to film. We can turn on transparent. We could even add our background geo to help kind of ground it and give it some physicality. And then if we are done with our HDR here, we could go into like our modeling tab or something else where we can see a full screen render. Maybe in this case we want to kind of make this highlight, unlock it a little bit. Now that we're in cycles, maybe we want to make this a little bit brighter. Just this one highlight, and then the other ones are more fill. And back to modeling, see how it's looking. And we could even change like our camera if we want to. Something like that. Also set up our own cameras, kind of do everything else, but this is a nice way, again, if you're doing some high poly renders, or you're doing some product rendering, or you really just want a little bit more control over an HDR you have, HDR Pro Studio is really nice. Again, you can find it. There's a few threads with it and like the newest updates and everything. Don't expect bugs to be fixed though, but it's been really nice for me. And I definitely recommend checking it out if you are looking for a free option to quickly play around with some HDR lighting.